Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadave Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tad Bhaktaya Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dhanavad Pranam devotees. So this is a very brief Q&A on two subjects. One is the mood that should be garnered or developed during the following of various vratas like Purushottam Mas vrat, Kartik vrat, Janmashtami vrat, Gaurapurnim vrat, or Ashtami vrat. Right? On all of these days, there are particular recommendations to be followed. And if you really analyze it, it can be broken into three divisions. Kayik, or bodily things to be followed. Manasik, mentality, or things that we should adjust our minds to. And bhavik, things which we should feel in the performance of those vrats. So, kayak, things that we do physically during these months or during those particular days is all laid out in Sastra. What food should be taken, what food should not be taken. Rising early in the morning, which is a standard that we have anyway, but the emphasis on rising in the morning, following certain practices regarding stav and stuti, just various other things that are listed, and you can go to any number of sites now in our Gaudiya Vaishnava presentations that speak about all the things to do and not to do externally on or in Purushottam Mas, Kartik Mas, or on the various tithis that we have, like Janmashtami, Gaurapurnim, etc. Krishna Mahan Prabhu ki Jai. So, I didn't want to speak as much about that because it is listed, but I did want to speak about the mindset, the manasik effect of observing these things and what frame of mind we should hold in order to cultivate a particular mood. So during any of these vrats, means these vows that we take to follow these things on these days, the idea is that they will enhance the essential features of bhakti. So 5 essential features of bhakti, of course, are Nam Kirtan, Sadhu Sangha, Bhagavat Sravan, Mathura. If you cannot be living in Braj or Mayapur Dham, etc., physically, then by mind and mood, right? And certainly Shri Murtaya Shradaya Sevan, the seva of your particular Thakurji in your particular home. Because the mindset should always be, an established mindset, is that I am a sevak living in the temple, which is, quote, our home, but actually it's the temple that belongs to the deities that preside there. And yourself, your family, are sevaks who live in that temple. This is the proper mindset. Because in this way, we don't contradict the internal aspiration which we acknowledge each morning. Because even before you rise from bed, you say the stav and stuti beginning, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, etc. That Namaha, Na Ahamameti. It is not I and mine, but I am Dasosmi. So it is both a declaration of Saranagati to the idea that it's not I and mine or anything to do with self-interest, but it is entirely based on the Anukul Seva of Hari Guru and Vaishnava. So having declared this, in order to make some consistency of mind, heart, and speech, we'll have to have the mentality that actually I am the Das or Sevak living in the temple of the presiding deities of that place. So for instance, in my home, the presiding deities are Shri Shri Gaura Gadadhar, Shri Shri Radhavallabhju, and Shri Giriraj. So myself, my family, we are the sevaks of the deities that reside here. all cooking, all cleaning, all accumulation of finance, anything is based around their service. So this is the constant manasic framework that we have to live in. On the days or in the months like Purushottam, Kartik, or Janmashtami, Gurpanim, etc., our mentality is that those are times where our service attitude, Sevon Mukh, is increased. That we have the chance or opportunity by the divine arrangement of the potency inherent in those days that we've read in Sastra to increase hearing and chanting, remembering, serving, etc. And to increase the intensity of Saranagati. So these days offer us a chance to engage Kaya, the body, in various activities which will stimulate the mindset of being the das of Sri Radha Krishna Yugal Mahaprabhu, but also it will increase the bhav, the intention that you have to obtain the goal of actual bhav. Bhav here I'm using in two different ways. Bhav meaning your aspirational mood, and bhav meaning the sadhya, or the goal of your practice. So these three things are always taken into consideration in these months or during those various titis, including the appearance and disappearance of Vaishnavas. All those days are meant to stimulate service in those three ways: kayak, manasik, and bhavik. Right? So we should not become overly absorbed in the ingredients of the kayak practice. In other words, okay, we should remember I should not eat this, I can't eat this, etc. But we should not become overly obsessed in the ritual attached to eating or not eating this, to bathing at this time or not, or doing this or doing that. We should keep the mood, especially for those who are aspiring in Rag Marg. There should be the mood like Brijbasis, that everything is for Krishna's Kalyan, everything is for Krishna's Anukul Seva, favorable mood of service. And this is our sum and substance. So we are not trying to walk the tightrope of expertise in ritual practice. We are trying to develop a mood, and that mood is enhanced by kayak involvement, meaning bodily involvement in following the rules and regulations of a brat. So this is very important, because sometimes a sort of misapplication and therefore missed opportunity takes place during these times, because there's so much absorption in the ritual that the essential manasic or mental state and the bhavik, the spiritual aspiration, are subdued by the external performance of the vrat. So we want to avoid that. I told a story last night that, of course, for so many years, especially my younger age, I always followed Nirjal Ekadasi until my health was not in a position to do so. So I remember while I was preaching in Africa, the whole temple was doing that. I didn't insist. I did it, and devotees thought, okay, I'll do it. He's doing it, I'll do it. So the whole temple was following this Nirjal Ekadasi. So in the community we live, this is while I was preaching in Zambia. During that time, all of our neighbors belonged to the Gujarati community, and the Hindu temple actually was just next to our preaching center. So pretty much that whole block that we were on and the community at large in that area were composed of, Indian families who frequented the temple or came to our temple or did both. So one of our neighbors was very, very supportive of our preaching there. In fact, they arranged for that house that was the preaching center. And they came to find out that we were doing bhajans throughout the day at different times during the Ekadasi Brat. And in the evenings, they would come and join us. After work, everything, they would come and join us. And they came to find out, because sometimes they would bring things to eat, and we would put them away, fruits or whatever, and say that, on today we're not taking anything, but, tomorrow we'll honor. So they came to find out that we were doing this observance of Nirjal Ekadasi. And so then they started to, on the Dwadasi, make lunch for us. And they would invite the entire temple to a home, especially my neighbor. They would invite the whole temple over for lunch. And the lunch would not be just like, maybe it was simple in their vision, but it would be very opulent actually. And I remember it came to a point where during the course of our fasting for that day and hearing and chanting, jokingly or not, sometimes discussion would come up, oh, I wonder what Pushpa is going to make tomorrow. You know, I just said the neighbor's name, but what is she going to make tomorrow? Oh, you know, the last time we had doklo, we had this thing or patra or something. And so it got to a point where I actually stopped myself and the devotees from going there after every Ekadasi because it started to become a meditation on the Dwadasi, and we felt that this was not appropriate. You know, and then at the times that we did go, we asked that everything would be made simple. Of course, that never happens, right? Because they always want to make very nice things. So, but the point being that we don't want to lose the mindset and meditation and the absorption internally of what the vrat is for in the name of observing the vrat, and then perhaps losing the true internal manasik and bhavik absorption, right? Because all of these vrats are meant to give avesh, absorption. So, second thing is ontology, history, and Siddhanta. I've spoken on this before, so very quickly. One devotee, very nice devotee, he writes many questions, and I answered him personally, by the way, but I'm just repeating it because I think it's a valuable thing for everyone, including my own edification. That his question was, he was listening to either a tape or reading a book, I can't remember right offhand, about Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada, in the beginning of the writing or lecture, was describing the nature of the Vibhinamsa Jivas, means the separated parts and parcels of Bhagavan called Jiv Shakti. And Srila Prabhupada was mentioning there that there are two divisions of these Jivas, Vibhinamsa Jivas. One is the, obviously, Nitya Siddhas, those who are eternally and without ever having any familiarization with the material energy, bound in service to Sri Krishna in the eternal abodes. Right? Then he mentioned the Anadi or Nitya Bhada Jivas, and how they from time without any beginning have been attracted by the nature of the illusory energy under the influence of avidya, etc., etc. So as he read on, Srila Prabhupada then started to describe the process of bhakti, and in describing that he mentioned that yes, and therefore we should take up the process of bhakti in order to revive our original Krishna consciousness and go back home, back to Godhead. So the devotee said he was having a difficulty in reconciling these statements in the beginning that seemed to be very clear statements of the fact that the Bhada Jivas have never had a relationship directly in the spiritual world, and that the Nitya Siddhas, they never come to the material world. But now there's a statement of apparently the Nitya Bhada Jivas having been originally, because this is the quoted word, originally Krishna conscious, having come here and now need to go back home, back to Godhead. So of course, there's never been so much research and proof that Srila Prabhupada derived the term back home, back to Godhead from a speech given by the Archbishop of Canterbury, in which, looking at the social fabric at that time, which was very irreligious and godless, coined the term to turn back towards the Godhead. Srila Prabhupada liked the term, felt it had very unique application in his preaching, that he was similarly trying to revolutionize the society as a whole to turn back towards God from their irreligious and sort of demoniac ways and so forth and so on. So he coined this term, back home, back to Godhead. So of course, obviously, way beyond the experience or understanding of the Archbishop of Canterbury, Srila Prabhupada's insight was much deeper, but he used this term as well to give an indication of the nature of the Jiva One ontologically being the eternal servant of Krishna. This is a constitutional reality that ontologically all of our acharyas have spoken about, though the Bada Jiva has not experienced. Right? Dasabhuti Hari Eva Nanyasya Eva Kadachana. It's written in Shastra. Jivera Sunupoye Krishna Nitya Das, Jivera Tatasta Shakti, Veda Be Prakash. It's written in so many places. The Jiva constitutionally is Dasosmi, is the Das of Sri Krishna. And therefore, that position cannot be altered at any time. That is the constitutional reality. Under the influence of illusion, vicariously, we can identify as being something else. The very first element of avidya is called asmita. The word asmi means I am. Ita is like a condition. The condition of thinking yourself to be something other than the servant of Krishna is called asmita. In that condition, it avails itself to being influenced by the material energy with the subtle element called ahamkar, which then permeates the chitta of the jiva and convinces them that they are the doer and the cause of everything. And then an upadi, or particular designation, arises due to karma. I'm John Doe, born in this family to Bob Doe and Sally Doe, etc. And I'm acting, like a dodo. I always make this funny sort of phrasing, right? I'm acting very crazy in this material world. So the idea here is that when the acharyas are speaking, the mature hearer of their harikatha has to be able to understand what is ontology, meaning speaking about the constitutional nature of reality, what is siddhanta, what is the conclusive truths, which are sectioned off according to different categories. Rasa Siddhanta, Jiva Tattva, Maya Tattva, Bhagavat Tattva. Accordingly, there's Siddhanta in each category. What is the established truths in any of these particular categories? Then there's ontology. If you read much of the writings of Jiva Goswami, he speaks many times ontologically. Like in Paramam Asandarbha, Anuchad 19 going, he's speaking about Jiva Tattva. And much of it is the ontology of the Jiva. What it is not, either spoken by Al Srila Prabhupada or Jiva Goswami Pad or other acharyas, is necessarily a history. So by using the phrase, originally we are all Krishna conscious living entities. Srila Prabhupada uses this phrase in describing the Mahamantra. Here the word original is an ontological statement, not a historical one. Because that would be conflicting with Siddhantic statements made by Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas also. Oh, look, Ram Prabhu, let me look and see if I can see the rest of the question. All right, I'll come and try to answer if I can finish this part. So, if I miss Prabhu, Lokram Prabhu to answer, please post it again, because sometimes the questions or comments are moving and I lose vision of them. So here, we have to differentiate what is an ontological statement, what is a historical statement, such as 500 and something years ago, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu descended to Navadvip Dham and performed so many leelas. 5,000 years ago, Sri Krishna Bhagavan appeared in Brajadam and performed this leela. There was a great battle called the Battle of Kurukshetra. It is written in one Itihasa. Itihas means Itihasa, a history described as it happened. So sometimes the acharyas are speaking historically, sometimes ontologically, and sometimes siddhantically. And it is in the maturation of the person hearing to distinguish which is which. And then you'll find that they're all reconciled. It's only when you do not have clarity what is ontology, what is siddhanta, and what is history, that some confusion comes and you begin to take, especially when there's translation into English language, you take certain words that have a meaning in English and apply them in a context historically which may not align with the ontology or siddhanta. Just like the whole idea we fell from the spiritual world is just exactly that. By the basis of the English statements that were misconstrued, an idea came about that somehow we were there in the spiritual world and fell, because original means something that had its origin and then somehow it changed, and now we're reviving that original position. Of course, here Srila Prabhupada and our acharyas were speaking ontologically, that constitutionally we are Das of Krishna from time without any beginning, anadikal, being connected with avidya. That consciousness has been absent in the Jiva. Jiva Goswami quotes, Anadi Paramatatva Jnanam Samsara Bhava Maya. So I'm not going into explanation about this abhav. Abhav has different categories, right? You can read in Paramatma Sandarbha. But he's quoting this, and he's giving the sort of ontological situation about the Jiva. Also, the first verse, Anuched 1 in Bhakti Sandarbha, he quotes Paramatma Vaibhava Gunane, etc. And there he also gives an ontology of what happened, how we have developed from that original consciousness to the state we're in under the influence of Maya. But he's not describing a history. Again, it's an ontology. It's the nature of Jiva Tattva. You understand? So this is a very important thing to be able to distinguish between, again, ontology, Siddhanta, and history when you're hearing Harikatha. All right, Lokram Prabhu, let me look at the question. So you're asking, of course, this question regarding the Swarup of the Jiva, meaning the Siddha Swarup of the Jiva. Of course, one thing to understand, whenever you're discussing Swarup of the Jiva, you have to define what is going to be indicated by the word Swarup. Because in Sanskrit, Swarup has different meanings. One meaning is the nature of something. So for instance, if you're describing the ontology of the Jiva, it would also be a description of the Jiva Swarup. If you're describing the perfectional stage of the Jiva, which is called their Siddha Swarup, their perfected Swarup, it would indicate their perfected nature along with the perfected form, moods, etc. So that is also called Swarup, but here would be Siddha Swarup. So the question really probably that you're asking is about the Siddha Swarup of the Jiva, and is that inherent or not? So of course there's been lots of controversy and many angles of vision on this particular tattva. Srila Bhakti Vigan Bharti Goswami Maharaj, he once was answering this question and he brought up what is called Drishtikon. Drishtikon means angle of vision. For example, if you draw the number 9 on the ground and you have somebody stand at one side of it and somebody stand at the other side of it, meaning the head of the numerical figure and at the other side of the numerical figure, one person can see that as 9, one person can see that as 6. You understand? Of course it would look backwards, but one will see as 9, one will see as 6. So it depends on the drishtikon or angle of vision. From the angle of vision of Nitya Vartmanakal, means from the angle of eternal time. In that perspective, because the Swarup of the Jiva, once it's realized, it is realized in Nitya Vartmanakal. So when you will realize your Siddha Swarup, there will not be a date stamp on it, like I realized it on December 3rd of 2024. Right? I don't know if I'm giving aspiration for a date or something, but anyway, it won't be realized in that material time frame because na cha kala vikramaha, in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 9th chapter, mentions that time has no influence in the spiritual realm. So there is no influence of time there. So when your Siddha Swarup is experienced, it's experienced as always having existed. The problem comes when those within the influence of Prakat Kal, means material time, try to conflate that understanding with where they are now. And therefore try to say, well, if it's existing there already, by some logic or reason, it's already in me right now. But then when you read the writings of all of our Goswami Varga and our Acharyas, they've clearly said, and I'll give the references. One is in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami. In fact, I'm going to pull that out and read it to you. And then another one is in the 26th chapter of Jaiva Dharma, where this very question is asked to Bhaktivinoda Thakur by Brajanath. He asked the question, is the rasa, which would mean the Siddha Swarup of the Jiva, predetermined? And Bhaktivinoda Thakur answers this question by saying, I cannot answer yes or no to this. Let me explain it and it will become clear. Then he goes on to explain exactly what all of the acharyas have explained. That the nature of the Swarup of the Jiva from this angle is the byproduct of bhakti samskars acquired in a particular life that have grown. That bhakti samskar produced a particular type of ruchi. So let me get Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, I think I have it marked, and I will read it to you. Alrighty. Let me see. I was looking at the verse the other day, so let me find it here. Alright, here we are. So this is from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu of Rupa Goswami Pad, and this is in the fifth wave, Stai Bhava Prakaran, 2538. There he quotes one verse. Yatottaramasho Shwadha Vishesha Lashamai Api Rati Vashanaya Shwadi Bhashyate Kapi Kasyachit. So, translation of this verse is that of the 5 types of rati, there are 5 types of rati. Hold on one second here. Haribo Mohini? Haribo? Haribo? Okay. Alrighty. So there are 5 types of rati. So the question is, of the 5 types of rati, progressively from Sudharati means just praying, right? Or just praying, to the highest rati, which is Madhurya Rasa, so means from Santa Dasya Sakya Vatsaya to Madhurya Rasa, from a neutral position to Tashta Vichar, there is an apparent gradation of the rasas as being more pleasing and more blissful than the previous rasa. This is from a neutral observation. For those who are situated in a particular rasa, that rasa is all-encompassing and all-fulfilling. You understand? So in the particular rasa, a person only identifies that this rasa is completely and absolutely fulfilling. But from a neutral position, by analysis, then Madhurya Rasa has the quality by neutral observation to be the highest and the sweetest. So then a question naturally arises. The particular taste arises in the devotee according to his previous experiences, because a question was generated, if in these 5 types of rasa, right, they're each progressively sweeter, what determines who gets what type of rasa? So Jiva Goswami's commentary on this. After the 5 rasas of rati have been described, a doubt arises. Should all of these types be considered equal or successively superior? If they are equal, then all the ratis should have the same inclinations. If, in other words, he's saying that if they're all the same, then everybody should have only one kind of inclination, because all the rasas are the same. But he's saying, if they are successively superior by taste, what then is the cause of different inclinations in people for different kinds of ratis? In other words, this is the question he's asking. What causes a particular devotee to have attraction to a particular type of ras? If they're all the same, it doesn't matter. But in this case, where from a neutral posture, we're examining a superiority. This is the meaning of the word yatotaram, right? Examining something to be higher and lower, right? So he says this verse answers increasing first from just Santa Rasa all the way up to Madhurya Rasa. It answers the question that there actually is, from a neutral position again, a superiority observed. So then he says, I'm just going to paraphrase here, then what determines what happens in each person to create an attraction to a particular rasa? So he gives an example. It must have come from impressions, because that's what's quoted in the verse by Rupa Goswami Pad. But then he says, is it that there are many impressions in the heart? Right? Or perhaps there's no impressions at all. Or maybe one type of impression. Give me 1 second because I'm multitasking here. Okay. So he says, are there many types of impressions, no impressions, or one type? So conclusively he says, from one type of impression that's coming from previous bhakti sanskars, that impression develops a particular type of ruchi or taste, which when that ruchi becomes mature, becomes the basis under a particular attraction to a particular kind of mood of service. Now, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary. Where has that impression come from? Among the various tastes, such as sweet, sour, and bitter, a particular person has a particular liking because of previous impressions. So he's making an example here to compare bhakti impressions for different rasas with the way people pick up impressions of different kinds of taste, in the material palette, right? And they say those tastes have come from previous impressions, right? So he says, because of impressions from past life, a particular rasa, such as dasya, in this life, let me read again. Because of impressions from a past life of a particular rasa, such as dasya, in this life also, the person has that taste alone, and not others. How was this particular taste gleaned or given? By the mercy of a great devotee with a similar taste. So I'm just quoting straight what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is saying. This is the case for not only Dasya Rasa, but for all the other higher rasas as well. So the conclusion of Jiva Goswami Pad, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur Pad, Rupa Goswami, is that from this angle of vision, the nature of a particular kind of taste in serving comes from an impression given by a devotee with that taste at some point in the sojourn. Because Jiva Goswami makes a point, you can't trace out when it happened. You understand? So at some point in the sojourn of the Bada Jiva, this impression came, that impression is what is grown. When that impression reaches maturity, my Guru Parapadma, because then I lined everything up with the saying of my Gurudev, Nityalela Purushottam Vishnu Paraparamsas Dr. Sriman, Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. He mentioned in different lectures about mature and immature greed, or lobe, or ruchi. So he mentions when the taste or ruchi or greed becomes mature, at that time a fixed mood is identified in the chitta of the jiva, and then it only awaits the descent of Swarup Shakti or Bhav Avast for it to clearly manifest. A similar thing is mentioned by Jiva Goswami Pad in Bhakti Sandarbha. I think maybe on Uched 308 or 310 or something like that. He mentions there, Tasya Tadrasa Surakaraka Basa Sumulasita Hridaya Spatika Mani. The heart, crystal-like, when it comes to the stage of maturity, Tasya Tadrasa Ragatmakaya Bhakti Paripatishu Api Ruchi Jayate. When it becomes mature, then Sudha Karaka Bhas, and a bhas of the mood of an eternal associate reflects on the chitta. And when it reflects on the chitta, a fixed determination for that mood to manifest becomes very dominant in the chitta of the jiva. This is called the stage of ashakti, right? Where there is a deep desire based, hopefully if one was mature, the indications of that and the beginnings of that start at the time when you take diksha and you receive sambandha gyan. If you are mature at that time, when Guru gives the mantra and the dhyan, the seed of everything is there. When you begin to mature, then those things come out and then they grow gradually through the stages. And of course, in the stage of asakti, what I'm describing here from Bhakti Sandarbha takes place. And a bhas of the mood of an eternal associate reflects on the heart, and at that time a fixed mood that nothing else can replace takes place. This is the saying of my Guru Purushottam. Then one bhav will descend. At that time, the influence of Swarup Shakti becoming one with the Atma of the Jiva crystallizes that particular mood and gives identification in the form of Ekadas Bhav, etc., etc. Understand? So, sometimes, of course, which has also led to sometimes misunderstanding, is that also Guru can speak from the point of view of Nityavatmanakal. And Guru will say, you have a very beautiful form, and you have a very beautiful relationship with Krishna in this way or that way. Of course, Gurudev has privy to seeing, first of all, your bhakti sanskars. Like my Gurudev used to say, it's a 99.9% chance if in this life you've come into my association and there's some depth of maturation in your bhajan, it is indicative that more than likely you're in Manjari Bhav. Right? Because the bhakti, like if somebody is in their senior year of law school, you won't consider, oh, what are you going to be, a doctor? An engineer? No, the previous history is dictating, I'm giving a material example, is dictating if you see them in the last year of law school, well, it's pretty clear they're going to be a lawyer. Now, that material example is not full because, of course, material things can change. But the spiritual dynamic is that what develops as a spiritual emotion does not change. Understand? Because it is transcendental substance, so it does not change. Understand? Now, when you realize your Siddha Swarup, and again, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's realized in Nityavatmanakal, your own conscious experience is, I was always this person. I was always this cowherd boy, this manjari, this iksevak, in this way or that way. Because there's no time influence there. But it's important to follow the mood and teachings of our acharyas, because other than that, there can be some artificial conflation that I already have my swarup, whatever it is, everything, and it's already there, and so forth and so on. Gurudev has taught that potential for a particular swarup is there. But the substance of that thing is not there, or we cannot be under the influence of Maya. And there's been many debates back and forth of this, so I don't want to recreate the situation, right? But I'm just giving what has been written by the acharyas, what has been told by my Guru Parapadma, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur as well, and they all align. So they're not in contradiction. And of course, I mentioned in the very beginning that Srila Bhaktivedanta Bharati Goswami Maharaj really gave insight, because he mentioned it depends on the angle of vision you're looking at it. From the angle of vision of unfolding sadhaka, then we have to look according to how our acharyas have written. My Guru Parapadma also, when this question was asked to him in front of my house, directly in front of my house, somebody asked this question, and he answered in such a way as to give indication of exactly what I'm speaking here. That the nature of the swarup of the jiva, long story short, will be realized. Gurudev says in bhavavas. But I've also heard him mention when we're coming in to the stage of a sakti means when your lobe has become mature, ruchi is mature. Because the first level of ruchi is in bhajan. Ataha ruchi bhajan vishaya. So the first level of ruchi is ruchi in bhajan itself. A taste for hearing and chanting and so forth. And that also has two stages. Vastu Vaishishta apekshaniya and Vastu Vaishishtin anapekshaniya. Right? One is more dependent on the quality that's presented. Like if you hear Harikatha, it's very sweet, oh, then you're attracted. If you hear Harikatha and somebody speaking just, you're not the body, etc., then you may not feel as much enthusiasm. But when you're more mature, everything you hear in regard to Krishna, Krishna Tattva, anything will give inspiration in your heart. Similarly, if you hear a kirtaniya whose voice is very melodious and the mridanga players are very expert in tal, everything, then your experience of the kirtan is very wonderful. If you hear even very high class Babu Vaishnav singing, but their voice is not very sweet, if you're immature, even in your ruchi, you'll think, oh, not so pleasing kirtan. You understand? So in maturation, the second part of the first stage of ruchi, one's experiences of the nature of their own maturation and bhav in relation to these elements of bhajan life. Hearing, chanting, remembering kirtan, etc. You understand? And when that becomes more mature, that's what becomes a Shakti. And at that stage, there's the aspirational mood only for the descent of the Kripa of Bhagavan. Understand? Srimati Radhika. That her mercy will descend and I will be able to realize my swarup in the eternal seva of my Gurudev, Srimati Radhika and Shri Krishna. So, my suggestion, Prabhuji, you can look in Jaiva Dharma chapter 26. I've given the quotes where in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. You can also, of course, look in Bhakti Sandarbha. Also, it is written there. And you can also, of course, more than anything, see all of the statements of our contemporary acharyas, our Gurudev, Srila Prabhupada, others, right? But see them with the understanding. Because again, we talked about earlier, Siddhanta, Ontology, and history. So remember I told you, you have to hear through these three ideals. Because even sometimes when our contemporary acharyas are speaking, they're speaking ontologically. Ontologically, everyone's the Das of Krishna, and that means everyone being the Das of Krishna has some kind of eternal relationship with Krishna. Because everyone is the Das of Krishna. But if they're speaking from the angle of Nityavatmanakal, they'll speak one way. If they're speaking from the angle of the unfolding sadhaka, they're speaking another way. But they can all be reconciled. All right, my Dandavat Pranam. I've gone a little over my intended time here. Vanchakalpaturubhyascha kripa sindhuvevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Radhe Radhe.